Mr. Speaker, when I was sworn into office, I took an oath to protect the Constitution of this great nation. I'm an immigrant who came to this country with just $20 in my pocket. The United States has given me so much. I love America, and I will do anything to protect our Constitution and our democratic values. Donald J. Trump has been committing crimes since day one: bribery, corruption, taking power from Congress, creating an unlawful office in DOGE, violating First Amendment rights, ignoring due process, and finally refusing to abide by a unanimous Supreme Court ruling. Just as I stand here in the House of Representatives, Mr. Trump is traveling to the Middle East to accept a gift worth $400 million from a foreign government. I have spoken with Americans all over the country.
Gentleman's time has expired. And members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise or seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intention to raise a question of the privilege of the House.
Yes, and the gentleman will read the notice.
May I proceed?
Yes, the gentleman is recognized to read the notice.
Mr. Speaker, the form of the resolution is as follows. House Resolution 353, impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. Resolution impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. Resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following articles of impeachment be exhibited to the Senate. Article of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives of the United States of America in the name of itself and of the people of the United States of America against Donald John Trump, President of the United States of America, in maintenance and support of its impeachment against him for high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 1, obstruction of justice, violation of due process, and a breach of the duty to faithfully execute laws. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Further, Article 2 of the Constitution states that the President shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. The Fourth Amendment of the Constitution states that the right of the people against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution states no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. in his conduct of the office of President of the United States and in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Donald John Trump has abused the power of the presidency in a manner offensive to and subversive of the Constitution, in that, using the power of his high office, Donald John Trump has engaged in this scheme of course of conduct through the following means. 1. By his orders and directions to subordinates, obstructed the administration of justice and embarked on a scheme to destroy and corrupt the legal system and the powers of the courts under Article 3 of the Constitution. Specifically, he has done the following: directed and permitted his subordinates and attorneys at the Department of Justice to violate their oath to uphold the Constitution, laws of the United States, and the rules of professional ethics by adducing misleading and willfully false representation to the courts of the United States and to otherwise abuse their official powers. Specifically, he has sought to dismiss without prejudice and under false pretense the bribery and fraud charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams in an unethical quid pro quo exchange for the defendant's cooperation with the administration's political priorities, thus abusing the criminal laws to unconstitutionally commandeer a state officer and unit of government in violation of the sovereignty thereof, and terminated and purged career Department of Justice attorneys without reasonable cause and in violation of the law in retaliation for their legitimate investigatory and prosecutorial work under prior administrations, including in relation to the January 6, 2021 attack on the United States Capitol, and in retaliation for attorneys upholding their ethical and legal obligations, including candor and honesty to the courts. B. Directed and permitted the evasion and defiance of binding court orders. Specifically, he has removed persons from the United States to El Salvador despite an order from the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, for which said court has found probable cause that the government committed acts of criminal contempt. Removed Kilmer Armando Abrego Garcia from the United States to El Salvador despite a binding withholding of removal order prohibiting the government from removing him to El Salvador. Defied court orders and upheld by a unanimous ruling of the Supreme Court to facilitate the release of Mr. Abrego Garcia and related orders to provide information to the court and opposing counsel while publicly flaunting their refusal. Acted in contempt of court for violating a court-sanctioned settlement agreement and conducted enforced disappearances of persons without due process and without disclosing their fate and location to their families and legal counsel, in violation of the Constitution and the rulings of the Supreme Court, as well as the foundational principles of due process and rule of law. C, directed and permitted the deliberate and systematic violation of laws duly enacted by Congress. Specifically, he has terminated inspector generals, the officers responsible for detecting and preventing waste by auditing and investigating their respective agencies, operations, and personnel, in violation of the process stipulated by the Inspector General Act of 1974, as subsequently amended. Terminated a member of the Merit System Protection Board, a tribunal created to address widespread public concerns about the federal civil service, and unlawfully transmitted sensitive personal information of private citizens and government employees in violation of, among other federal laws, the Privacy Act and the Administrative Procedures Act. In all of this, Donald John Trump has willfully disregarded federal laws and the Constitution, imperiled a co-equal branch of government, and threatened the integrity of the democratic system. He thereby betrayed his trust as president, abused the powers of the presidency, acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and has committed the high crimes and misdemeanors of obstruction of justice and effecting a wide-ranging scheme to destroy and corrupt the legal system and the powers of the courts under Article 3 of the Constitution. Wherefore, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he is unfit to govern a nation by and for the people, has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office. Article 2, usurpation of the appropriations power. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Further, Section 9 of Article 1 of the Constitution states that no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by the law. In his conduct of the office of presidency of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Donald John Trump has abused the power of the presidency in a manner offensive to and subversive of the Constitution, in that, using the powers of his high office, Donald John Trump unlawfully usurped Congress and his power to appropriate funds, thereby nullifying the appropriation clause in the Constitution and violating the Impeachment Control Act of 1974. Since taking office, he has signed numerous executive orders directing agencies to withhold funds appropriated by Congress. The President does not have the power to override spending laws or impound appropriated funds, a principle affirmed by numerous Supreme Court rulings. Donald John Trump has withheld funds and terminated en masse federal employees and numerous federal agencies and departments, including the following. Number one, directed the dismantling of the Department of Education, as enacted in the Department of Education.
From South Carolina seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Michigan was recognized for 1 minute. He has substantially exceeded 1 minute with absurdities.
Actually, the gentleman is, at this point had spoken for 1 minute, then was recognized subsequently to give notice under Rule 9 for a resolution. So the gentleman has the floor for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Michigan may continue.
Signed into law by President Jimmy Carter, the Department of Education was established by Congress to create reform in the education system throughout the country and distribute federal aid to students and places of learning and prohibit discriminatory practices. The President does not have the authority to dismantle the Department of Education, and he signed of Executive Orders 14242, which aims to improving education outcomes by empowering parents, states, and communities, violates the law and the Constitution. 2, unlawfully directed the elimination of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, as enacted in the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. Signed into law by President John F. Kennedy, USAID plays a crucial role in delivering foreign assistance worldwide, including disaster relief, conflict relief, combating global diseases, promoting educational programs, and enhancing food security in developing countries. By dismantling USAID and freezing foreign assistance, he has severed the United States from its humanitarian role as directed by Congress, leaving other countries and potentially our adversaries to fill in the role the United States has abandoned. 3, created the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which has imposed payment holds and rescinded funds after disbursement. Donald John Trump has utilized DOGE to unlawfully block or impound appropriated funds to dozens of federal agencies, including the National Institute of Health, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. By impounding congressionally appropriated funds, Donald John Trump has and DOGE have not only violated the law, but have negatively impacted the American people by cutting jobs, halting critical services, and rescinding grants for programs in defiance of the express constitutionally binding will of Congress. Using the powers of his high office, Donald John Trump has unlawfully withheld congressionally appropriated funds and attempted to dismantle congressionally mandated agencies by withholding funds and crippling agencies. he has prevented the federal government from performing critical duties here and abroad. He has threatened the well-being of United States citizens through the gross misconduct of his office, resulting in dire and life-threatening consequences on the world's most vulnerable populations. Wherefore, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he is unfit to govern a nation by and for the people, has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office. Article 3, abuse of trade powers and international aggression. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Further, Section 8 of Article 1 of the Constitution states, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. In his conduct of the office of President of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his abilities, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duties to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald John Trump has abused the powers of the presidency in a manner offensive to and subversive of the Constitution, in that, using the powers of his high office, Donald John Trump abused trade powers by imposing unjustifiable and unreasonable tariffs on foreign nations, causing a sharp decline in the United States economy and the economies of countries around the world, and declaring the false existence of a national security emergency to justify his actions. Donald John Trump's tariffs contradicted trade agreements established by his administration and other administrations, including the duty ratified and binding treaty obligations of the United States, thereby breaking international laws and norms, leading to countries around the world to enact damaging tariffs on goods and services originating from the United States. His Liberation Day scheme, which imposed 10% tariff on all countries, as well as additional tariff based on a formula for reciprocity, widely mocked as a nonsensical, led to the most significant drop in the financial markets since 2020, crash triggered by COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, Donald John Trump has threatened foreign nations with invasion, the annexation of territory, and the occupation of sovereign territory through the use of military action. By doing this, he has implicated the United States and himself in violation of constitutionally binding treaty obligations, to include the North Atlantic Treaty of 1949, the General Treaty of Renunciation of War as an instrument of national policy of 1928, the Charter of the United Nations of 1945 and the Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance of 1947, Donald John Trump threatened the following: annexation of the sovereign country of Canada. Donald John Trump has negatively impacted the deep and historic relationship between the United States and Canada by stating numerous times that Canada should become the 51st state under the threat of both economic coercion and military force. 2. Unlawful and aggressive military action within Mexico, to include drone strikes and the use of special operations military personnel, ostensibly against drug cartels in violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of that country and without any congressional authorization to use military force. 3. Annexation of Greenland, an autonomous territory in the Kingdom of Denmark. Donald John Trump has continued to use hostile language aimed at taking control of Greenland, stating that the United States will go as far as we have to go to obtain control of Greenland. He has refused to rule out military action to gain control of the territory in violation of international law, and despite Denmark's long-standing alliance and friendly relations with the United States. 4. Annexation of the Panama Canal, owned and controlled by Panama. During a joint session speech to Congress, Donald John Trump stated that his administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal. He has refused to rule out military or economic action against the sovereign country. Annexation of the Gaza Strip, involving the forced resettlement of the Palestinian population to the surrounding countries. Donald John Trump has stated that the United States will take over the Gaza Strip and own it. His proposal of taking over the Gaza Strip and the expulsion of its population violates international law, including the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, would be unconstitutionally absent the approval of the United States Congress, and is profoundly unserious in light of the grave humanitarian situation and ongoing armed conflict in Gaza. Using the powers of his high office, Donald John Trump has unlawfully conducted himself, bringing shame and embarrassment to the office of the presidency and the people of the United States. He has betrayed the trust of the nation to conduct meaningful diplomatic negotiations as its chief diplomat and failed to maintain peaceful economic and defense relations with foreign countries. He has threatened the security of the United States through gross misconduct of his office, prompting hostilities towards Americans here and abroad, as well as foreign nations warning their citizens against visiting the United States, further harming the nation's economy. Wherefore, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he is unfit to govern a nation by and for the people, has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office. Article 4, violation of First Amendment rights. the Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office of impeachment for conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Further, the First Amendment of the Constitution states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridge the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and the petition the government for a redress of grievances. In his conduct of the office of President of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his ability to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald John Trump has abused the powers of the presidency in a manner offensive to and subversive of the Constitution, in that by his orders and directions to subordinates retaliated against the law firms and attorneys who have advised or represented or been associated with those who advise or represent litigants who displease him. In violation of the Constitution's prohibition on retaliation against individuals for engaging in First Amendment protected conduct, including the right to petition the government for redress or grievances. Specifically, he has barred attorneys at certain law firms from access to federal buildings, arbitrarily revoked security clearance without a reasonable basis, threatened to cancel federal contracts with any entity engaged the targeted attorneys and firms, and demanded pro bono services from the law firms in exchange for the discontinuation of the punitive executive orders. Additionally, Donald John Trump has engaged in a pattern of unconstitutional, unlawful, and corrupt retaliation against critics and political opponents, a flagrant violation of constitutional rights protected by the First Amendment. He has weaponized the Department of Justice and other agencies to engage in spurious investigations and harassment with no basis in law of public figures and his perceived political enemies. Since taking office, Donald John Trump has directed the Department of Justice to dismiss more than a dozen prosecutors who were involved in investigation against him after he left office in 2021. The Department of Justice has subsequently launched investigations into officials involved in prior probes against Donald John Trump, in some cases against individuals specifically named and accused in flagrantly improper executive orders. Furthermore, he has made direct and unambiguous public statements threatening media outlets, current and former office holders, and advocacy organizations. He has pursued meritless litigation, leveraged his public office for private gain, and perverted the course of justice and the integrity of the judicial system to extract tens of millions of dollars in putative settlements, effectively acting as a conduit for flagrant bribery and extortion. He has restricted the access of the Associated Press after they refused to use the name Gulf of America in their reporting and has defied court orders to seize this unconstitutional action. He has also threatened current and former members of Congress for the exercise of their legislative and oversight functions, an attack on the independence of Congress as a co-equal branch of government as established by the Constitution's Article 1 vesting clause and by the Constitution's speech of debate clauses in addition to the First Amendment. For example, Donald John Trump has repeatedly threatened members of the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol, which investigated the attack on the Capitol that Donald John Trump investigated. Donald John Trump has sought to intimidate the members and staff of the United States House Select Committee on the January 6th attacks, stating that they should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level and expressing a desire to remove the pardons they received, stating the pardons that Sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force of effect. Donald John Trump has made it clear that he will not rest until all of his perceived political enemies are eliminated. In a speech addressing his Department of Justice subordinates, Donald John Trump further laid out his fascist vision for the Department of Justice. He has targeted watchdog organizations like the Citizens for Responsible and Ethics in Washington, calling them scums, and independent media outlets like CNN and MSNBC, labeling them as organizations that literally write 97.6% bad about me, are political arms of the Democratic Party. And in my opinion, they are really corrupt and they are illegal. What they do is illegal. He has stated that newspaper critical of him are really no different than a highly paid political operative. And it has to stop. It has to be illegal. It's influencing judges. It just cannot be legal. By these and many other actions, he has sought to outlaw dissent, opposition, and criticism of himself and his administration. This attack on the constitutional rights to the freedom of speech and of association and of the right to petition the government for redress of grievances is wholly incompatible with the rights and liberties of the people of the United States, as well as self-governing people under the rule of law. In purpose and effect, he has attempted to suppress dissent and opposition, casting a chilling effect over the public discourse and striking at the core freedoms essential to a free society and democratic elections under the Constitution. Wherefore, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he is unfit to govern a nation by and for the people, has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office. Article 5, creation of unlawful office. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Further, Section 2 of Article 2 of the Constitution states that the President shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and counsels, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States. But the Congress may, by law, vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the President alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. In his conduct of the office of President of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald John Trump has abused the powers of the presidency in a manner offensive to, subversive of the Constitution, in that, using the powers of his high office, Donald John Trump has, through unlawful orders and directives, created an unlawful office, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, and assigned an extensive range of unlawful powers, effectively granting this flagrantly unconstitutional creation significant control over the executive branch. Donald John Trump has appointed Mr. Elon Musk as the de facto head of this contrived entity, which was not created or funded by any law, without a formal title or office. These actions have been in direct violation of the Constitution requirement that principal officers of the United States must be created by law and their appointees confirmed by the Senate, and that inferior officers must be created by law with their appointment vested as Congress may determine. Additionally, he has vested these powers in Mr. Musk without complying with the constitutional requirement that all officers of the United States be commissioned by the President and swear an oath of office to support the Constitution. Mr. Musk has been designated as a special government employee of the White House office in violation of the statutory authorization and restrictions of such designation. This false claim has also been used to commit violation of the ethics, disclosure, and conflict of interest laws applicable to government offices and regular employees. Contrary to the government's claim in courts, Mr. Musk has exercised de facto control over DOGE, and through it, control over a wide range of government departments and agencies. This unmistakably reality has been repeatedly and openly stated by the Trump administration, included by Donald John Trump's own address to Congress on March 4, 2025. In this capacity, Mr. Musk and his subordinates have undertaken numerous violations of the Constitution and laws, including by 1. Impoundment of funds appropriated by Congress. 2. Violation of privacy and security laws with respect to sensitive information systems, personally identified information, and classified material. And 3. Termination of government employees under false pretense and in violation of civil service laws. These actions have vastly exceeded the terms of the formal executive orders purportedly to create DOGE under the direction of a U.S. DOGE service administrator, an official which remains vacant for several weeks, and with the government's own attorneys claiming in court that the official head of DOGE was unknown to them. Since that time, a nominal administration has been named despite the repeated avowals from the president and his administration that Mr. Musk controls and directs DOGE, as confirmed by ample public reporting and Mr. Musk's own statements. Donald John Trump has abused the powers of his high office and breached the public trust by establishing the so-called Department of Government Efficiency and unconstitutionally placed Mr. Musk in control of this entity, knowing provided false testimony to the court regarding the leadership the said entity and directing the unlawful entity to implement his agenda in violation of the Constitution's objective establishing justice and fundamental rules for how the executive branch of the United States is to be structured and how persons may be appointed to public office. Wherefore, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he is unfit to govern a nation by and for the people, has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office. Article 6, bribery and corruption. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Further, Section 9 of Article 1 of the Constitution states that no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of the Congress, accept of any presents, emoluments, Donald John Trump has abused the powers of the presidency in a manner offensive to and subversive of the Constitution, in that Donald John Trump has engaged in a pattern of unlawful corruption for the personal profit of himself and his associates, soliciting and accepting bribes in exchange for official actions, policy influence, and favorable treatment from the administration. In so doing, he has, beyond a reasonable doubt, profiteered from public office on a scale unprecedented in American history. Donald John Trump has engaged in fraudulent con artist schemes through pump and dump or rug pull tactics for cryptocurrency tokens. He has created and at the same time enabled a direct conduit for bribes paid to him in exchange for official actions. Donald John Trump has also leveraged the threat of hostile government action and the corresponding offer of preferential treatment in order to extract large payments in the form of settlements for meritless and vexatious litigation he pursues in his personal capacity, thereby corrupting both the executive branch and the judiciary. To advance his end, Donald John Trump solicited and received $940 million in pro bono services from prominent law firms to help causes he personally supports. Donald John Trump has refused to divest himself or take any steps to prevent conflicts of interest in his substantial personal business ventures, creating another conduit for the payments of bribes. Donald John Trump has permitted and encouraged his subordinates to violate laws regarding ethics, disclosure, and self-dealing, and through these actions, he has enabled and encouraged corruption and graft by his relatives, associates, and political allies. Donald John Trump has in these ways and others solicited payments from foreign governments for corrupt purposes and in flagrant violation of the Constitution's prohibition on foreign emoluments. Whereupon, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he is unfit to govern a nation by and for the people, has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with the self-governance and the rule of law, and will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office. Article 7, tyranny. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Further, the system of checks and balances, as well as separation of powers as defined in the Constitution, work to ensure that the office of the President does not become tyrannical in his conduct of the office of President of the United States and in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States and to the best of his abilities preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Donald John Trump has abused the powers of the presidency in a manner offensive to, subversive of the Constitution, in that he has, by his actions and statements, sought to establish himself as tyrant, dictator, and autocrat over the people of the United States, usurping unto himself the constitutional powers of Congress, the courts, and the states, and powers illegitimate and beyond the scope of lawful government altogether. He has claimed for himself absolute and arbitrary power, the ability to suspend laws at whim, and utterly disregarded and betrayed his oath to faithfully execute the office of presidency of the United States and to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. He has denied and violated the right of the people of the United States to freedom of speech and of assembly and to petition the government for redress of grievances. He has denied and violated the right of the people of the United States to due process of law and equal protection under laws, to fair, impartial, independent courts, and to legal counsel. He has sought to intimidate and coerce by means including the threat of unlawful prosecutions and by encouraging violence and threats of violence the representatives and senators in Congress. He has denied, violated the separation of powers and the Constitution's systems of checks and balances, arrogating unto himself the legislative and judicial powers, including the power of Congress to levy taxes, appropriate public funds, direct the organization of officers and agencies of the executive branch, and to make laws. He has sought to intimidate, coerce, and exhort the officers of the several states, including those elected by the people thereof, and thereby sought to commandeer the several states in violation of their sovereignty and the system of federalism established by the Constitution of the United States. He has sought to abrogate the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution by means including the issuance of an executive order that directs executive departments and agencies to withhold citizenships from certain classes of persons who are born within the United States. He has repeatedly threatened and suggested that he intends to violate the presidential term limits established by the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution and adopted overtly monarchical aspirations and affectations, including by invoking and endorsing theories that he is above the law or that his personal will constitutes the law. In all of this, Donald John Trump has willfully disregarded federal laws and the Constitution, imperiled a co-equal branch of government, and threatened the integrity of the democratic system. He thereby betrayed his trust as president, abused the powers of the presidency, acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and has committed high crimes and misdemeanors in attempting to establish himself as the lawless tyrant to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he is unfit to govern a nation by and for the people, has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office.
Resolution offered from the floor by a member other than the majority leader or the minority leader as a question of the privileges of the House has immediate precedence only at a time designated by the chair within 2 legislative days after the resolution is properly noticed. Pending that designation, the form of the resolution noticed by the gentleman from Michigan will appear in the record at this point. The chair will not at this point determine whether the resolution constitutes a question of privilege. That determination will be made at the time designated for consideration of the resolution.